She knocked on a stranger's door with nothing but desperation and a proposal that made no sense. He said yes without asking questions. But when Elena Ward stepped into Caleb Holt's ranch house that frozen November morning, she walked into something that had been waiting for her. Shelves built to her height, tea she'd never mentioned, a life arranged around habits he shouldn't know. This wasn't kindness. This was something else entirely. Something that had been watching, planning, waiting for 10 years. And the truth hiding in that house would shatter everything she thought she knew about survival, choice, and love. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And hit that like button so I know you're ready for what comes next. The wind off the stockyards cut through Elena's coat like it had a personal grudge. She'd walked 4 miles in boots that were more whole than leather, and her feet had stopped hurting about a mile back, which she knew wasn't a good sign. The address was crumpled in her palm, ink smeared from where she'd gripped it too tight. 4772 Ashford Road. She'd gotten it from a woman at the shelter 3 days ago. Carol. Carol with the gray braid and the eyes that had seen too much to be shocked by anything. "You want a roof that bad?" Carol had said, not unkindly. "There's a man out past the rail yards. Keeps to himself. Lost his wife some years back. Might take you in if you ask right." Elena hadn't asked what ask right meant. She'd just taken the address. Now, standing at the end of a long gravel drive, looking at a house that sat low and solid against the Texas prairie, she wondered if this was the stupidest thing she'd ever done. The list was long, but this felt like it might crack the top 3. The house was limestone and cedar, single story, with a wide porch and windows that didn't give anything away. Smoke came from the chimney. The yard was neat, too neat for a man living alone. Fence posts painted white, firewood stacked in perfect rows, a truck that looked older than her but clean. She made herself walk up the drive. Gravel crunched under her boots, loud in the quiet. A dog barked somewhere behind the house, deep and steady, the kind of bark that meant business. She didn't see it, but she heard a low voice tell it to hush, and it did. Elena climbed the porch steps. Her hand shook when she raised it to knock. She hated that. She hated that her body gave her away like that. 3 knocks, solid. She stepped back and waited. The man who opened the door didn't look like someone who'd lost a wife, but then again, she didn't know what that was supposed to look like. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, maybe 40 or a few years past it. Dark hair going gray at the temples. He wore a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up and jeans that had seen work. His face didn't tell her anything. It was still neutral, like he'd learned a long time ago not to react before he had all the facts. He looked at her, didn't speak. Elena's throat went dry. She'd rehearsed this, practiced it while she walked. But standing there under his gaze, the words felt flimsy and ridiculous. My name is Elena Ward," she started. Her voice cracked. She steadied it. "I need help. I was told that maybe you'd—" "You're cold," he said. His voice was low, quiet, not unkind. "Come inside. I haven't told you what I want yet. You can tell me inside." He stepped back, holding the door open. Elena hesitated. Every instinct she had left told her not to walk into a stranger's house. But the wind picked up behind her, and her feet hurt, and she didn't have anywhere else to go. She went inside. The warmth hit her first, then the smell. Coffee, wood smoke, something baking. The front room was simple. A couch that had seen years but wasn't worn out. A fireplace with a low fire going. Bookcases along one wall, packed tight. A kitchen visible through an open doorway. Clean counters, no clutter. "Sit," the man said, nodding toward the couch. "I'll get you coffee." "I don't need— Sit." She sat. He disappeared into the kitchen. She heard the sound of a mug being set on a counter, liquid poured. She used the time to look around. The room was clean but not empty. Lived in. A pair of boots by the door, not hers. A coat on a hook. A dog bed in the corner. The cushion dented in the middle. The man came back with 2 mugs. He handed her one and took the armchair across from her. He didn't drink, just held the mug and waited. Elena wrapped her hands around the coffee. The heat hurt at first, then didn't. "I'm being evicted," she said. "No point dancing around it. 4 days from now. I don't have family, I don't have friends who can take me in. The shelters are full until after Christmas, and I can't—" She stopped, started again. I was told you're alone here, that you might need help with the place. I'm good with my hands. I can cook, clean, mend things. I don't eat much. I won't be trouble. He watched her. His face still didn't give anything away. I'm not asking for charity, she said, harder now. I'm offering a trade. Work for a roof. That's all. What else did Carol tell you? He asked. Elena blinked. How did you... She's the only one who'd send someone out here. She said you were alone, that you might take me in if I asked right. Elena set the mug down. Her hands were still shaking. I don't know what that means. I don't know what you want from me, but I'll work. I'll earn it. I just need... Her voice broke again. She hated it. I just need to not freeze this winter. The man set his mug down too. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. He looked at her like he was reading something written on her that she couldn't see. My name's Caleb Holt, he said. This is my land. I run cattle, some horses. It's just me here, has been for a while. Elena nodded, waited. You want to stay? He said slowly. You can. I won't ask you to work yourself raw. House needs tending, sure, but it's not going to kill you. You pull your weight, we'll call it even. Relief hit her so hard she felt dizzy. Thank you, Thank you. But, Caleb said, and the words stopped her cold. If you're staying, we do it proper. Proper? You stay here as my wife. The room went very still. Elena stared at him. What? Marriage, Caleb said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. Legal, binding, nothing else changes. You keep your room, I keep mine. We're civil. We don't make a show of it, but on paper you're my wife. That's the deal. Elena's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I'm not asking for anything from you, Caleb said. His voice stayed level. This isn't that, but I won't have talk. Won't have people assuming things or making your life harder because you're a woman living alone with a man. We make it legal. It stops the talk before it starts. You get what you need. I get help with the place. Clean trade. You want to marry me, Elena said faintly. A stranger. Yes. Why? Caleb's jaw tightened just slightly. The first crack in that still mask. Because you need help, and I can give it. Nobody does that, Elena said. Nobody just... People don't... I do. She stared at him. He stared back. His eyes were brown, she noticed. Dark, steady. They didn't waver. If you don't want it, Caleb said after a moment, the door's there. I won't stop you, but if you stay, that's the term. Take it or leave it. Elena looked at the door, then at the fire, then at her hands, red and cracked from cold. 4 days until eviction. No money. No plan. December coming fast, and winter in Texas wasn't the kind that killed you quick. It was the kind that wore you down slow, night after night, until you just stopped getting up. She looked back at Caleb. This is insane, she said. Yes. I don't know you. No. You don't know me. True. What if I steal from you? What if I'm dangerous? Caleb almost smiled. It didn't quite reach his eyes. Are you? No, but... Then we're fine. Elena pressed her hands to her face. Her brain felt like it was shorting out. This was crazy. This was the kind of thing you heard about and shook your head at. This was a mistake. But she was so tired of fighting, of scraping, of waking up every morning with the same weight pressing on her chest, telling her she wasn't going to make it. Okay, she heard herself say. Okay. Caleb nodded once, like she'd just agreed to split firewood, not marry him. We'll go to the courthouse tomorrow, he said. Get the paperwork done. You'll need to bring your ID. I have it. Good. He stood. There's a bedroom down the hall, second door. It's yours. Bathroom's across from it. Towels in the closet. I'll bring your things in from... He paused. Did you bring anything? Elena shook her head. Caleb's expression shifted just barely. Something that might have been anger, but not at her. We'll get you what you need. For now, there's clothes in the closet that might fit. Help yourself. Whose clothes? Elena asked before she could stop herself. Nobody's, Caleb said. Too quick. Just take what you need. He He left the room before she could ask anything else. Elena sat there for a long time, holding a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm, staring at the fire. The dog barked again outside. The wind rattled the windows. She felt like she'd just signed something she couldn't read. But she was inside, and she was warm, and that was more than she'd had an hour ago. The bedroom was small, clean, and completely impersonal. A bed with a quilt folded at the foot, a dresser, a lamp, a window that looked out over flat land going gold in the late afternoon light. The closet had 3 dresses hanging in it, simple cotton and a couple of sweaters. They looked new. Not vintage, not hand-me-downs. New. Elena touched one of the dresses. It was soft. Her size, near as she could tell. She shut the closet and sat on the bed. The mattress was firm but not hard. The quilt was handmade, the stitching even and tight. The room smelled faintly of cedar and soap. It didn't feel like a guest room. It felt like it had been waiting. She pushed the thought away. She was exhausted. She was seeing things that weren't there. A knock on the doorframe made her jump. Caleb stood there, not coming in. "Dinner's in an hour," he said. "You don't have to come out if you're not ready, but it'll be there." "I'll come," Elena said. He nodded and left. She sat there a while longer, then got up and went to the bathroom. It was as clean as the rest of the house. White tile, a shower with good pressure, a mirror that didn't have any cracks. She washed her face and hands, scrubbing until the grime came off and her skin was raw. She looked at herself in the mirror, 32 years old. Thin, tired, hair that needed cutting, eyes that had seen more bad days than good ones lately. She didn't look like somebody's wife. But then again, this wasn't that kind of marriage. Impossible. Dinner was pot roast, potatoes, carrots. Simple, hot, and more food than Elena had seen on one plate in a month. Caleb set it down in front of her without ceremony and took the seat across the table. They ate in silence for a while. Elena tried not to wolf it down, but she was so hungry it hurt. Caleb didn't comment. He just ate steady and slow, like he had all the time in the world. "This is good," Elena said finally, because the silence was starting to press on her. "Thank you." "You cook?" "Some." "Enough." "Good. We'll split it then. I'll handle breakfast, you handle dinner. Lunch we fend for ourselves." Elena nodded. It was practical, sensible, a division of labor. She could do that. "What do you do?" she asked. "For work, I mean." "Cattle. Some horses. Sell the stock, lease some of the land. It's enough." "You do it alone?" "Mostly. I hire help for roundup. Rest of the time it's just me." Elena looked around the kitchen. Everything in its place, nothing wasted. "You keep a clean house for someone who works outside all day." Caleb's fork paused, just for a second. "Habit." "From before?" "Before what?" Elena hesitated. "Carol said you lost your wife." Caleb set his fork down. His face went blank again, that wall slamming back into place. "Carol talks too much. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "Her name was Sarah," Caleb said. His voice was quiet, flat. "She died 6 years ago. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. She didn't suffer." He picked up his fork again. "That's all you need to know about it." Elena nodded. She didn't push. They finished eating in silence. Caleb cleared the dishes without asking if she wanted help. Elena stood to assist anyway, but he waved her off. "You've had a long day," he said. "Get some rest." She wanted to argue, but her body was screaming at her to lie down. "Okay, thank you for—" She stopped. What was she thanking him for? Feeding her? Sheltering her? Proposing marriage to a stranger? For this? Caleb didn't turn around. "Don't thank me yet." Elena went to bed. She didn't sleep. She lay there in the dark, listening to the wind, to the house settling, to the faint sound of Caleb moving around in another part of the house. The bed was warm. The quilt was heavy in a good way. She should have been out like a light. But her brain wouldn't stop spinning. She'd just agreed to marry a man she didn't know. A man who'd opened his door without hesitation, offered her shelter without question, and laid out terms that sounded too clean to be real. People didn't do that. Not without wanting something. But Caleb had looked her in the eye and told her he wasn't asking for anything. And she'd believed him, or wanted to believe him, or was so desperate that the difference didn't matter. Elena stared at the ceiling and tried to tell herself this was just survival, a transaction, a means to an end. But the dresses in the closet nagged at her, the room that felt like it had been waiting. The way Caleb had looked at her, not with pity, not with hunger, but with something else she couldn't name. She rolled over and closed her eyes. Tomorrow they'd go to the courthouse. Tomorrow this would be legal. Tomorrow she'd be Elena Holt, at least on paper. And maybe that would make it feel less insane. Maybe, what? The courthouse was old brick and tall windows, the kind of building that had seen 100 years of people making promises they weren't sure they could keep. Elena stood on the steps, hands shoved in the pockets of a coat Caleb had given her that morning, heavy wool, too big, but warm, and tried to steady her breathing. Caleb stood beside her, hat in hand, not rushing her. "We don't have to do this," he said. Elena looked at him. He meant it. She could see it in his face. If she turned around right now, walked down those steps, he'd let her go, probably even drive her wherever she wanted. But she'd spent the night in a warm bed, eaten a breakfast that didn't come from a gas station, felt, for the first time in months, like maybe she wasn't drowning. "Let's go," she said. Inside, the process was shockingly mundane. Paperwork, signatures, a board clerk who looked at them like they were the fifth couple that morning and didn't ask questions. A judge who came out of his office, read the lines, asked if they consented, and signed the certificate without fanfare. 10 minutes, start to finish. "Congratulations," the judge said, like he was handing them a parking validation. And that was it. They walked out into the cold November sun as husband and wife. Elena looked at the certificate in her hand. Her name, his name, a date, a seal, legal, binding. "You okay?" Caleb asked. "I don't know," Elena said honestly. He nodded, like that made sense. "Let's get you some clothes." They went to a department store on the south side. Caleb told her to pick what she needed. Practical stuff, he said. Things that would last. Elena moved through the racks in a daze, grabbing jeans, shirts, a couple of sweaters. She didn't let herself look at prices. Caleb didn't seem to care. He paid cash at the register, didn't flinch at the total. "You need boots," he said when they got back to the truck. "I have boots." "You need boots that don't have holes." She didn't argue. By the time they got back to the house, it was late afternoon. Caleb carried the bags inside and set them on her bed. "Take your time getting settled," he said. "I'll be outside if you need anything." He left before she could respond. Elena stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by bags full of things she hadn't paid for, wearing a coat that wasn't hers, holding a marriage certificate with her name on it. She sat down on the bed and put her head in her hands. This was real. This was happening. She'd just married a man she didn't know, and he'd bought her clothes and fed her and given her a room, and she didn't understand any of it. But she also didn't have anywhere else to go. So she unpacked the bags, hung the clothes in the closet next to the dresses that had been waiting, put the new boots by the door, folded the coat over the back of the chair. And when she was done, she looked around the room and thought, for the first time in a long time, that maybe she'd be okay, even if she didn't understand why. The first week passed in a strange, careful rhythm. Elena cooked dinner every night. Caleb made breakfast every morning. They moved around each other with a kind of practiced politeness, like roommates who didn't want to step on each other's toes. Caleb worked outside most of the day, fixing fence, tending stock, doing the 100 things that needed doing on a ranch. Elena cleaned the house, which barely needed it, and tried to make herself useful. But the longer she stayed, the more she noticed. Little things, odd things. The sewing corner in the front room, tucked by the window where the light was best. The shelf was the perfect height. She didn't have to stretch or stoop. The scissors were sharp, the thread organized by color, the pincushion exactly where her hand naturally reached. She mentioned it once, casual, over dinner. "You sew?" she asked Caleb. "No." "Then why the setup?" He didn't look up from his plate. "Sarah did. Never got around to clearing it out." Elena let it drop. But the answer didn't sit right. The thread wasn't old. The scissors weren't dusty. The fabric in the basket was new, still stiff from the store. Then there was the tea. She'd found it in the pantry the third morning, tucked behind the coffee. A small tin, labeled in careful handwriting, chamomile and lavender. Her favorite. The blend she used to buy when she had money, back when she could afford things like favorite tea. She hadn't mentioned it, hadn't told Caleb, hadn't told anyone. She stood there holding the tin, staring at it, trying to make it make sense. Coincidence, she told herself. People drink chamomile. It's not that weird, but the handwriting on the label was fresh. The tin wasn't dusty. And when she opened it, the smell hit her like a memory she couldn't place, familiar, specific, hers. "You finding everything okay?" Caleb asked from the doorway. Elena nearly dropped the tin. She turned, heart pounding. "Yeah, fine, This tea. Where'd it come from?" "Store." "When?" "Does it matter?" Elena held up the tin. "This is my favorite. I didn't tell you that." Caleb's expression didn't change. Lucky guess. He left before she could ask anything else. Elena put the tin back on the shelf and stood there, pulse still racing. Lucky guess? Right. She tried to let it go, tried to tell herself she was being paranoid, that grief and stress were making her see patterns that weren't there. But then she found the books. She'd been dusting the shelves in the front room, something to do, a way to feel useful, when she noticed the spines. Poetry, novels, plays, a collection of Mary Oliver, a worn copy of Beloved, the entire Earthsea series, her favorites, all of them. Elena pulled one off the shelf, hands shaking. The pages were creased, annotated. Someone had read these. Recently. She opened the Mary Oliver. A passage was underlined. "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" In the margin, in the same handwriting from the tea tin. She would have loved this. Elena's breath caught. She flipped to the front cover. No name, no inscription, just that single note in the margins. She pulled down another book, then another. All of them had notes, small things. A word underlined here, a phrase circled there. Nothing overt, but deliberate, intentional. "What are you doing?" Elena spun around. Caleb stood in the doorway, coat still on, hat in hand. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp. "These books," Elena said. Her voice came out thin. "They're mine. I mean, not mine, but these are the books I love. All of them. How did you—" "They were Sarah's," Caleb said. His voice was flat, hard. "No, they weren't." Elena held up the Mary Oliver. "This note, this handwriting, it's fresh. The ink hasn't faded. And it says—" She stopped, read the note again. She would have loved this. She looked at Caleb. Who would have loved this? Caleb didn't answer. He just stood there, jaw tight, eyes locked on hers. "Caleb?" Elena said slowly. "What's going on?" "Nothing. Don't lie to me." "I'm not." "Then explain this." She gestured at the shelves. "Explain the tea. Explain the sewing corner that's built exactly my height. Explain the clothes in the closet that fit me perfectly. Explain—" Her voice cracked. "Explain how this house feels like it's been waiting for me." Caleb's face went very still. For a moment she thought he might actually tell her. Thought she might see something break in that careful mask he wore. But instead, he just turned and walked away. "Caleb, us." The door slammed. Elena stood there, book in hand, heart hammering. The fire crackled in the hearth. The wind rattled the windows. And somewhere in the house, a clock ticked steadily, counting down to something she didn't understand yet. But she would. She was going to find out what the hell was going on, even if it meant tearing this house apart. Elena didn't go after him. She stood in the front room with the book still in her hand, watching through the window as Caleb crossed the yard toward the barn. His stride was long, purposeful, like he was putting distance between himself and something he didn't want to face. She set the book down carefully, spine aligned with the others, and made herself breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way her mother had taught her when she was small and the world felt too big. But breathing didn't make the wrongness go away. She looked around the room with new eyes. The furniture arrangement, simple but deliberate. The couch angled just so, facing the fire but also the window. The lamp on the side table, positioned exactly where she'd naturally reach for it when she sat down to read. The throw blanket folded over the armrest, cream-colored wool, soft as clouds. her favorite color. Elena walked to the kitchen, opened cabinets at random. The mugs were all the same height, easy to reach without stretching. The plates stacked neatly, not too many, not too few. The spice rack organized alphabetically, each jar full, labels facing out. Paprika, rosemary, thyme. The ones she used most. The ones she'd had in her own kitchen before everything fell apart. She yanked open the pantry, scanned the shelves, pasta, rice, canned tomatoes, beans, staples, but also raspberry preserves, honey from a specific brand she remembered from childhood, a bag of dried apricots she used to eat by the handful when she was stressed. Her hand went to her mouth. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't lucky guesses. This was knowledge, specific, intimate knowledge about who she was and what she liked. And Caleb had it. Elena shut the pantry door and leaned against the counter. Her mind raced, trying to assemble pieces that didn't fit. They'd never met before she knocked on his door. She was sure of that. She would have remembered him. You didn't forget a man like Caleb Holt, but he knew her. Somehow, he knew her. The dog barked outside, sharp and insistent. Elena looked out the window. Caleb was in the corral with one of the horses, working a lead line, his movements steady and controlled. The dog sat at the fence watching him. She needed answers, and she needed them before this went any further. Elena grabbed her coat and headed for the door. The cold hit her face like a slap. She crossed the yard, boots crunching on gravel, and stopped at the corral fence. Caleb didn't look at her. He kept working the horse, a chestnut mare with a white blaze, guiding her in a slow circle. "We need to talk," Elena said. "Not now." "Yes, now." Caleb brought the mare to a stop. He still didn't look at Elena, just ran a hand down the horse's neck, checking something Elena couldn't see. "How long have you known me?" Elena asked. "I don't know you." "Don't." Her voice came out harder than she meant. "Don't lie to me again. The books, the tea, the way this house is set up. You know things about me, personal things. So I'm asking you one more time. How long have you known me?" Caleb finally turned. His face was stone, but his eyes were tired, like he'd been waiting for this conversation and dreading it in equal measure. "We should go inside," he said. "Answer the question." "Inside, Elena." The way he said her name made something twist in her chest. Not angry, not cold, just weary. She followed him back to the house. Caleb took off his coat and hat, hung them on the hook by the door with deliberate care. Then he went to the kitchen and put on coffee, even though they'd both already had 2 cups that morning. Elena stood in the doorway, arms crossed, waiting. When the coffee was poured, Caleb set a mug in front of her and took the chair across the table. He wrapped his hands around his own mug but didn't drink. 10 years, he said finally. Elena's stomach dropped. "What?" "I've known about you for 10 years. That's not possible. We've never spoken," Caleb said. "You don't know me, but I've known you." Elena sat down slowly. Her legs felt unsteady. "How?" Caleb stared into his coffee like it might have answers he didn't. "I saw you for the first time at a farmer's market in Fort Worth. You were buying tomatoes. You were arguing with the vendor about whether heirlooms were worth the extra $1 a pound. You won. You always could argue." Elena's breath caught. She remembered that market. Remembered going there when she still lived in the city, before everything went wrong. But that was years ago, a lifetime ago. "You were wearing a blue dress," Caleb continued, voice low and even. "Your hair was longer then. You had a book in your bag, the corner sticking out. I could see the title, East of Eden." "Stop," Elena said. Her voice shook. Caleb kept going. "The week after that, I saw you at a coffee shop on Magnolia. You ordered chamomile tea, not coffee. You sat by the window. You read for 2 hours. You smiled at something on the page, and I thought—" He stopped, swallowed. "I thought I'd never seen anything like that smile." "You followed me." The words felt like stones in her mouth. "No, not like that. I didn't—" Caleb ran a hand over his face. "I wasn't trying to. At first it was coincidence. I'd see you around. Fort Worth's not that big. But then I started noticing things, the places you went, the things you liked, and I couldn't—" He broke off again. "I couldn't stop noticing." Elena stood up. The chair scraped loud against the floor. "You watched me. For 10 years, you watched me." "Yes." That's insane. That's... She couldn't find a word big enough for what that was. I know. You don't know me, Elena said, but the words felt hollow even as she said them. You don't. You can't. You watched me like some kind of... I loved you, Caleb said. The room went silent. Elena stared at him. He looked back, face open for the first time since she'd met him. No mask. No wall. Just raw, tired honesty. You can't love someone you don't know, Elena said. I know. Then what you're describing isn't love, it's obsession. Maybe. Caleb's jaw tightened. I never said it made sense, never said it was right, but it's what happened. Elena's hands were shaking. She shoved them in her pockets. Did you do anything? Try to talk to me, or did you just watch? I just watched. For 10 years. Yes. Why? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was almost too quiet to hear. Because you were happy. You had a life. You had friends, a job, a place that was yours. And I was... He gestured vaguely at himself. I was a man who'd lost his wife and didn't know how to be anything else. I didn't have the right to walk into your life and disrupt it just because I felt something. So I didn't. Elena felt like the floor was tilting under her. But you built this. All of this. You set up a house for someone you never spoke to. I built it for you after Sarah died, Caleb said. Maybe before that even. I don't know anymore. The sewing corner was first. I told myself it was for Sarah, but her height was wrong. The shelf was always too low for her. She never used it, but I kept it. I kept adding to it. And then the books came. Your books. I'd see you carrying them, or I'd see the titles on your social media before you deleted your accounts. You looked me up online? Elena's voice pitched higher. Years ago. You don't post anymore. You haven't for a while. Because my life fell apart, Elena said, something hot and sharp rising in her throat. Because I lost my job and my apartment and everything I had. And you were just, what, watching? Taking notes? Yes. Caleb didn't flinch. I watched you lose it all. I watched you try to keep going. I watched you get thinner, tired, desperate, and I hated it. Hated that I couldn't... He stopped. When you knocked on my door, I'd already been thinking about you for months, wondering where you were, if you were okay. That's why you let me in, Elena said slowly. Not because Carol sent me, because you already knew who I was. Yes. Elena turned away. She couldn't look at him anymore. Her brain was screaming at her to leave, to get out, to run as far and fast as she could, but her feet stayed planted. I should go, she said. Where? I don't know. Anywhere. This is... She waved a hand helplessly. This is too much. I know. You should have told me. I know. Before I agreed to this, before I married you, you should have... I know. Caleb's voice was rough now. But I didn't. Because I wanted you here. I wanted you safe. And I told myself it didn't matter if you knew, as long as you were okay. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to make those choices for me. You're right. She turned back to face him. Then why did you? Caleb stood slowly. He looked older suddenly, worn down by something he'd been carrying too long. Because I'm selfish. Because I've loved you from a distance for so long that when you finally showed up, I couldn't let you go, even knowing it was wrong, even knowing you'd figure it out eventually. He met her eyes. I'm not a good man, Elena. I'm just a man who wanted to keep you. Elena's chest felt too tight. This isn't love. What you're describing, it's not... Maybe not, Caleb said, but it's all I've got. They stood there in the kitchen, the space between them charged and awful. The coffee had gone cold. Outside, the wind was picking up, promising another hard freeze tonight. I need time, Elena said finally. I need to think. Take all the time you need. I might leave. I won't stop you. Elena nodded. She walked to her room and shut the door. Then she sat on the bed and put her head in her hands. Her mind was spinning. 10 years. He'd been watching her for 10 years, building a life around someone he'd never spoken to. That wasn't love. That couldn't be love. But he'd also let her in when she was desperate, fed her, married her to give her safety, asked for nothing in return. Or had he? Maybe this was what he'd wanted all along. Her, here, in the house he'd built for her. Elena didn't know what to do with that. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The quilt was heavy and warm. The room smelled like cedar. Everything was soft, comfortable, hers. Except it wasn't hers. It was his idea of hers. And that made all the difference. She didn't leave that day. Or the next. She told herself it was because she didn't have anywhere to go, but that wasn't quite true. She could have gone back to the shelter. Could have figured something out. But she stayed. Partly because the alternative was freezing on the street, but partly because she needed to understand. Needed to see if there was more to this than what Caleb had told her. So she started looking. Carefully. Quietly. She went through the house when Caleb was outside working, not tearing things apart, just observing, seeing what else he'd built around her. The closet in her room had clothes in her size, but also space left open, like he'd known she'd need room to add her own things. The dresser had sachets of lavender tucked in the drawers. Her mother used to do that. She'd mentioned it once, years ago, in a blog post she'd written about childhood memories. He'd read that, remembered it, put lavender in the drawers. Elena found receipts in the kitchen drawer, dated purchases going back months. Tea, books, fabric, all the things that were hers now. He'd been buying them before she ever showed up. She found a notebook in the study, tucked on a high shelf behind a row of ranch ledgers. She pulled it down and opened it. Inside were notes, dates, observations. June 12th, saw her at the library. She checked out 3 books, one on native plants. She's still gardening. August 3rd. She looked tired today. Thinner. Haven't seen her smile in weeks. October 29th, she's gone. No sign of her anywhere. I'm worried. Elena's hand shook as she flipped through the pages. There were years of this. Not every day, but often enough. A chronicle of her life written by someone she'd never known was watching. It was invasive, wrong, but it was also careful. He hadn't approached her, hadn't tried to insert himself into her life. He'd just watched and kept his distance until she'd knocked on his door. Elena closed the notebook and put it back. She didn't mention it to Caleb, didn't ask about it. She just filed it away with everything else she was learning. At dinner that night, they ate in silence. Caleb had made stew. Elena hadn't cooked. She'd told him she needed space, and he'd respected it without question. I'm not leaving, Elena said finally. Caleb looked up. Okay. Not yet anyway. I need time to figure this out, to understand what this is. Take all the time you need. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. Elena set down her fork. Why? Why are you so okay with this? I could leave tomorrow. I could walk out and never come back. Why aren't you fighting for me to stay? Caleb's expression didn't change. Because that's not what you need. You need space. You need to decide for yourself what you want. If I push, I'm just making your choice for you again. I've done enough of that. So you're just going to wait? Yes. For how long? As long as it takes. Elena shook her head. That's not normal. No, Caleb agreed. It's not. They finished eating. Caleb cleaned up. Elena went back to her room and sat by the window, looking out at the flat, dark land beyond. She thought about what it meant to be loved by someone who'd never spoken to you, who'd built a life for you in silence, who'd waited 10 years for a chance that might never come. It should have terrified her. And part of it did. But another part of her, the part that had been alone for so long, felt something else. Seen. For better or worse, Caleb Holt had seen her. Not just looked at her, but seen who she was. What she liked. What she needed. And he'd cared enough to remember. That didn't make it right, but it made it something other than simple obsession. She just didn't know what. The next morning, Elena woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She got dressed and went to the kitchen. Caleb was at the stove. Same as every morning, cooking breakfast like nothing had changed. Morning, he said without turning around. Morning. Sleep okay? Not really. He nodded, like he'd expected that. He plated the food and set it in front of her. Eggs, bacon, toast. Simple. Good. They ate together. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was just there, a space between them that neither knew how to cross yet. I want to see them, Elena said. Caleb paused mid-bite. See what? The letters. You said you've been watching me for 10 years. You must have more than just that notebook. I want to see all of it. Caleb set down his fork. Why? Because I need to understand. I need to see what you saw. What made you think any of this was okay? He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Okay. Where are they? Hidden. Where? Caleb stood. I'll show you. Elena followed him to the hallway. He stopped at the linen closet, reached up to the top shelf, and pulled down a stack of towels. Behind them was a small wooden panel. He pressed on one corner, and it swung open. Inside was a cedar box, old and worn at the edges. Caleb pulled it out and handed it to Elena. It's all in there. Elena took the box. It was heavier than she expected. You're just going to give this to me? You asked for it. You could say no. I could, Caleb said. But I won't. Elena looked at him. His face was calm, but his eyes were tired, like he'd been waiting for this moment and was almost relieved it had finally come. I'll be outside, he said. Take as long as you need. He left her standing there, holding the box. Elena carried it to her room, set it on the bed, stared at it for a long minute. Then she opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to her, in that same careful handwriting from the notebook. Her hand shook as she pulled out the first one. The date at the top was almost 10 years old. Dear Elena, I saw you today at the market. You were buying tomatoes and arguing about the price. You made the vendor laugh, even though he tried not to. I don't know why I'm writing this. You'll never read it, but I need to put it somewhere, and this feels like the right place. You smiled today. I thought I'd remember that smile for a long time. Elena's throat tightened. She picked up another letter. Dear Elena, it's been 6 months since I first saw you. I know where you live now. Not because I followed you. I didn't. But I saw you walking home one evening, and I drove past, and I know the street. I won't go there. I won't get closer. But I know where you are, and that's enough. You looked happy today. I hope you stay that way. Another letter. Then another. Years of them, stacked carefully, chronologically. A one-sided conversation with someone he'd never spoken to. Some were short, observations, little moments he'd noticed. Others were longer, rambling thoughts about his own life, his grief over Sarah, his struggle to figure out who he was after she died. And threaded through all of it was Elena, what she was doing, how she looked, what he imagined she might be thinking. It was intimate and invasive and tender all at once. Elena read every single letter. It took hours. By the time she finished, the light outside had shifted from morning to afternoon. Her eyes burned. Her chest ached. The last letter was dated 2 weeks before she'd knocked on his door. Dear Elena, I don't know where you are anymore. I haven't seen you in over a month. I'm worried. I keep thinking about driving into the city, looking for you, but I don't know where to start. And even if I found you, what would I say? I've loved you for so long, and you don't even know I exist. Maybe that's how it should be. Maybe I'm supposed to just let this go. But I can't. I've tried. And I can't. If you're out there, I hope you're okay. I hope you're safe. I hope someday you'll knock on my door. Elena set the letter down. Her hands were shaking. She felt hollowed out, like someone had reached inside her and scooped out everything she thought she understood. Caleb had loved her, quietly, desperately, from a distance, for years. And she'd had no idea. She stood up, legs unsteady, and walked to the window. Outside, Caleb was in the corral again, working with the mare. The same steady movements, the same calm focus. He'd given her the letters knowing what she'd find, knowing she'd see just how deep this went. He hadn't tried to hide it, hadn't tried to soften it. He'd just handed her the truth and walked away. Elena pressed her forehead against the glass. It was cold, grounding. She didn't know what to feel. Anger, maybe. Violation. But also something else. Something she didn't have a name for yet. Because in all those letters, in all that watching, Caleb had never taken, never demanded, never tried to force his way into her life. He just loved her. Quietly. Hopelessly. And when she'd finally shown up, he'd let her in without hesitation. Elena closed her eyes. This was insane. All of it. She should leave. She should pack her things and walk out and never look back. But she didn't move, because for the first time in years, someone had seen her, really seen her, and cared, even if the way he cared was completely wrong. She stayed at the window until the sun started to set. Then she went back to the bed, gathered up the letters, and put them carefully back in the cedar box. She didn't know what she was going to do with this information, didn't know if she could forgive it or accept it or move past it. But she knew one thing: she wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not until she understood what this was and what it could become. Elena didn't go out to talk to him that evening. She stayed in her room with the cedar box, opening it and closing it, running her fingers over the worn edges like they might give her answers. When Caleb knocked softly on her door to tell her dinner was ready, she said she wasn't hungry. He didn't push. She heard his footsteps retreat down the hall, heard the quiet sounds of him eating alone in the kitchen. She felt guilty about that, which was ridiculous considering everything. He'd been watching her for 10 years, building a house around her like she was some kind of blueprint for a life he wanted. She didn't owe him dinner conversation, but the guilt sat there anyway, small and stubborn. Around 9, she finally emerged. The house was dark, except for the fire in the front room, burned down to embers. Caleb was in the armchair, reading by lamplight. He looked up when she came in, but didn't say anything. Elena sat on the couch. The space between them felt enormous. "I read them all," she said. Caleb closed his book, set it on the side table. And I don't know what to do with it. That's fair?" "Is it?" Elena's voice came out sharper than she meant. "Because I don't think fair has anything to do with this. You wrote me letters for 10 years. You built a house for me. You watched me live my entire life, and I had no idea you existed." "I know." "Stop saying that." Elena stood up, too restless to sit. "Stop just agreeing with me like that makes it okay. It doesn't. None of this is okay." Caleb leaned back in the chair. He looked exhausted. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to explain it. I want you to tell me how you thought any of this was normal." "I didn't think it was normal." "Then why did you do it?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. The fire popped, sending up a small shower of sparks. "Because I didn't know how to stop. I saw you that first time, and something in me just latched on, and the more I saw you, the more I noticed, the worse it got. I tried to walk away, told myself I was being insane, but then I'd see you again, and it was like—" He stopped, searching for words. "Like I'd been looking for something my whole life and didn't know it until I found it." "That's not love," Elena said. "That's obsession." "Maybe they're the same thing sometimes." "They're not." "Then you tell me the difference." Elena opened her mouth, closed it. She didn't have an answer. "I loved Sarah," Caleb said quietly. "I loved her the way you're supposed to love someone. We dated, got married, built a life. It was good. It was right. And when she died, I thought that was it. Thought I'd had my chance and I'd just live out the rest of my days quiet and alone. But then you saw me." "Yeah." Caleb rubbed a hand over his face. "And it wasn't like it was with Sarah. It wasn't slow or gradual or built on anything real. It was just instant, complete. Like I'd been walking around half blind, and suddenly I could see." "You didn't know me," Elena said. "You couldn't have loved me. You didn't know anything about me." "I knew enough. From watching me buy tomatoes, from watching you live." Caleb's voice was steady, but low. "I saw you be kind to people who didn't deserve it. I saw you fight for things you believed in. I saw you laugh with your friends and cry when you thought no one was looking. I saw you lose your job and keep going anyway. I saw you be brave when you had every reason to quit." He looked at her directly. "I saw you, Elena. Maybe not the way you're supposed to see someone. Maybe not in a way that makes sense. But I saw you." Elena's throat tightened. "That doesn't give you the right—" "I know it doesn't. I'm not asking you to forgive it. I'm just telling you what happened." She turned away from him, staring into the dying fire. Her mind was a mess. Part of her wanted to scream at him, to make him understand how violated she felt. But another part of her, the part that had spent the last few years completely invisible, struggling and alone, felt something else. He'd seen her. When no one else had been paying attention, when she was drowning and too proud to ask for help, he'd been watching. And he'd cared. That didn't make it right, but it made it complicated. "I need more time," Elena said finally. "Take it. I might still leave." "I know." She looked back at him. Why aren't you fighting harder? Why aren't you trying to convince me to stay? Caleb met her eyes. Because the only way this works is if you choose it. If I pressure you, if I manipulate you, then I'm just doing the same thing I've been doing all along, making decisions for you, and I'm done with that. So you'll just wait. Yes. Even if I decide to leave. Even then. Elena shook her head. I don't understand you. That makes two of us. She wanted to say something else, but the words wouldn't come, so she just nodded and went back to her room. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended tension. They moved around each other carefully, maintaining the routines they'd established. Caleb worked outside. Elena tended the house. They ate meals together, speaking only when necessary. The conversations were brief, practical. Pass the salt. Cold front coming in. We need more firewood. But underneath the surface, something was shifting. Elena found herself watching him when he didn't know she was looking. The way he moved, efficient and deliberate. The way he treated the animals, firm but gentle. The way he fixed things that were broken without announcing it, just quietly making the world around him work better. He didn't try to impress her, didn't perform. He just existed, solid and steady, and gave her space to figure herself out. It was maddening and comforting in equal measure. One afternoon, she was in the kitchen making bread, something to do with her hands, a way to think without thinking, when Caleb came in from outside. He washed up at the sink, dried his hands, then paused. You don't have to do that, he said, nodding at the dough she was kneading. I know. I wanted to. He hesitated, like he wanted to say something else, then just nodded and left. Elena stared after him. That was the thing that kept throwing her. He never asked for anything, never expected gratitude or acknowledgement. He just let her be. She punched down the dough harder than necessary. That evening, she found him in the barn. He was fixing a bridle, fingers working the leather with practiced ease. The mare was in the stall behind him, watching with liquid brown eyes. Can I ask you something? Elena said from the doorway. Caleb looked up. Yeah. Why didn't you ever try to talk to me? In all those years, you could have just walked up to me. Introduced yourself. Why didn't you? He set down the bridle. Because you didn't need me to. What does that mean? It means your life was yours. You were happy, or at least heading toward happy. You had people, plans, a future, and I was just some guy who'd seen you at a farmer's market and couldn't let go. He picked up the leather again, ran his thumb over a seam. If I'd walked up to you, what would I have said? Hi, I'm Caleb. I've been watching you for months and I think I might be in love with you. That's not romantic. That's restraining order territory. So you just stayed away. I stayed away, even when things got bad for me. Caleb's hand stilled. Yeah, even then. Why? Because me showing up wouldn't have fixed anything. It would have just made me feel better. And this was never about making me feel better. Elena leaned against the doorframe. When did you know I was in trouble? About 8 months ago. You stopped going to your usual places, stopped posting online. I'd drive through your neighborhood sometimes just to see if you were around, and your car was always there, but you weren't. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what, and I didn't have any right to find out. But you wanted to. Every damn day. Elena was quiet for a moment. The mare shifted in her stall, hay rustling. What would you have done if I hadn't knocked on your door? Caleb looked at her. I don't know, probably on nothing. Probably just kept wondering and hoping you were okay. He paused. Or maybe I would have broken eventually, driven into the city, tried to find you, made a complete fool of myself. You think you haven't already? The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. Fair point. Elena pushed off the doorframe. I'm going for a walk. It's cold out. I know. She grabbed her coat and headed out into the evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The wind had died down, leaving everything still and quiet. She walked the property line, following the fence posts. The land stretched out flat and endless, broken only by the occasional mesquite tree. It was stark, beautiful in its emptiness. She could see why Caleb had stayed here, why he'd built a life in this quiet place. When she came back, it was full dark. The house glowed warm in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney. She stopped at the porch steps and just looked at it. This house that had been built for her, this life that had been waiting. She still didn't know if she could accept it. Didn't know if what Caleb felt was real or just the product of years of distance and imagination. But she was starting to think maybe it didn't matter. Maybe the real question wasn't whether his love made sense. Maybe it was whether she could live with it, whether she could take something born from obsession and silence and turn it into something real. She went inside. Caleb was in the kitchen cleaning up from dinner. He'd saved her a plate, covered it, left it on the counter. "Thanks," she said. "Sure." Elena sat down with the food. It was still warm. Chicken, roasted vegetables, potatoes. Simple and good, like everything else he made. Caleb dried his hands and started to leave. "Stay," Elena said. He stopped, turned back. "Sit with me," she said. "I'm tired of eating alone." Caleb pulled out the chair across from her, sat down. Didn't say anything, just waited. Elena picked at her food. "I've been thinking about what you said, about seeing me." "Okay. I don't think you saw me. Not really. I think you saw an idea of me, a version you built in your head." Caleb considered this. "Maybe at first. But the letters, those weren't about an idea. Those were about you, the real you, the person I watched struggle and fight and keep going even when it would have been easier to quit." "You don't know what it was like," Elena said quietly. "Living through it. You saw the outside. You didn't see the nights I couldn't sleep or the mornings I couldn't get out of bed. You didn't see me fall apart in private." "No," Caleb agreed. "I didn't see that. But I saw enough to know you didn't quit, and that's what mattered." Elena set down her fork. "Why does that matter? Why do you care if some stranger you've never met quits or not?" "Because I needed to believe people could keep going," Caleb said. His voice was rough now. "After Sarah died, I didn't see the point in much of anything. I kept working because that's what you do. Kept breathing because the alternative wasn't an option. But I didn't feel alive. And then I saw you, and you were so—" He stopped, started again. "You were so damn determined, even when things got hard, even when I could see you were struggling. You kept showing up, and I needed to see that, needed to know it was possible." Elena stared at him. "You're saying I kept you going?" "Yeah. I didn't do anything. I didn't even know you existed." "Doesn't matter. You still did it." She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process the idea that her life, her stupid, messy, falling apart life, had meant something to someone, had kept someone tethered. "That's a lot of weight to put on a person," she said finally. "I know. I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing." "Then what do you want me to do?" Elena pushed her plate away. "I want you to tell me the truth. All of it. No more holding back. If we're going to figure out what this is, I need to know everything." Caleb nodded slowly. "Okay. What do you want to know?" "Everything. Start with Sarah." He flinched, just slightly. "What about her?" "You said you loved her, that it was good, but you also built a house for me while you were still married to her. So which is it?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Both." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." He leaned back in the chair. "I loved Sarah. I did. She was good and kind and patient with me, even when I didn't deserve it. We had 5 years together, and they were good years, but they weren't—" He stopped, searching for words. "They weren't all-consuming. They weren't the kind of love that keeps you up at night. We were comfortable, content, and I thought that was enough. And then you saw me." "Yeah, and I realized it wasn't." Elena felt something twist in her chest. "Did she know?" "No, I never told her, never acted on it. I was faithful to her in every way that mattered." "Except in your head." "Except in my head," Caleb agreed. "And I hated myself for it. Hated that I could love one person and want another. Hated that I was building things for you while Sarah was right there, alive and real and mine." "But you kept doing it." "I kept doing it. Why?" Caleb met her eyes. "Because I couldn't stop. Because some part of me knew Sarah wasn't going to be here forever, and I needed something to hold on to when she was gone." His voice cracked slightly. "I didn't know it would happen the way it did. Didn't know she'd be taken that fast. But some part of me was already preparing for it." Elena sat back. "That's messed up. I know." "I was going to say sad." Caleb looked away. "Yeah, that too." They sat in silence for a while. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rattling the windows. When she died, Elena said carefully, Did you feel relieved? Caleb's face went hard. No, I felt gutted. She was my wife. I loved her. Her death wasn't some convenient way for me to move on. It was a nightmare. But it also meant you could what? Build a house for a woman who didn't know I existed? Yeah, real convenient. His voice was bitter now. I spent 2 years after Sarah died just trying to function. The house projects, the additions, the things I built for you, those were the only things that kept me going. They gave me something to focus on that wasn't grief. Elena reached across the table, stopped herself before touching his hand. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked that. You have every right to ask. Still. Caleb looked at her hand, hovering between them, then at her face. You want the full truth? Yes. The truth is, I don't know if what I feel for you is real or just something I built up in my head over 10 years. I don't know if I love you or if I love the idea of you. I don't know if this house I built is for the real Elena Ward or for some version of you I invented. And I don't know if that even matters anymore. Elena pulled her hand back. It matters. Does it? You're here. You're real. You're sitting across from me, asking questions, pushing back. That's more than I ever thought I'd have. But you don't know me. Not really. Then let me, Caleb said. His voice was quiet but intense. Stay. Give me time to know the real you, not the version I watched from a distance, not the one I built a house for. You. The person sitting here right now. Elena's breath caught. And if the real me isn't what you expected, then I'll deal with it. You say that now? I mean it. Caleb leaned forward. I've spent 10 years loving an idea. I'm ready to love a person, even if she's difficult, even if she's nothing like what I imagined, even if she decides tomorrow that this is all too much and leaves. Elena stood up abruptly. The chair scraped loud against the floor. I need air. She grabbed her coat and went out onto the porch. The cold hit her like a wall, but she didn't go back inside. She just stood there, gripping the railing, trying to breathe. This was insane. All of it. She should leave, should pack her things and walk away and find somewhere else to start over. But where would she go? And what would she be starting over from? The door opened behind her. Caleb came out, but he didn't come close, just stood there, giving her space. I'm scared, Elena said without looking at him. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of the fact that part of me wants to stay. Why does that scare you? Because I don't know if I'm staying because I want to or because I don't have anywhere else to go. And I don't know which is worse. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You know what I think? What? I think you're staying because you're curious, because some part of you wants to know what this could be, and that's enough for now. Elena turned to look at him. Is it? It is for me. She searched his face. In the dim light from the windows, he looked older, tired, but also steady, solid, the kind of person who wouldn't break under pressure. I don't forgive you, she said, for the watching, for the letters, for all of it. I'm not asking you to, but I'm not leaving, not yet. Okay, and I want... She stopped, started again. I want you to tell me things about yourself, real things, not just about me or Sarah or any of this. I want to know who you are. Caleb nodded. I can do that. Starting tomorrow. Starting tomorrow. Elena went back inside. Caleb followed after a moment, but he didn't push for more conversation. He just banked the fire and said goodnight and went to his own room. Elena lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. She'd made a decision, even if she hadn't said it out loud. She was staying, at least for now, at least long enough to figure out if what Caleb felt was real, and if what she was starting to feel was anything more than gratitude and confusion. It was a risk, a big one, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had something worth risking it for, even if she didn't quite understand what that something was yet. The next morning started the same as all the others. Coffee, breakfast, the sound of Caleb moving around the kitchen while Elena got dressed. But when she came out, he was sitting at the table instead of heading straight outside, and there was something different in the way he looked at her. You said you wanted to know things, he said. About me. Elena poured herself coffee and sat down. I did. Where do you want me to start? She thought about it. Why ranching? Why this? Caleb looked out the window at the flat expanse of land. My father had this place. Worked it his whole life. I grew up hating it, hated the isolation, the work, the way everything took so damn long. I left when I was 18, swore I'd never come back. But you did. Yeah, after he died, I came back to sell it. That was the plan. Get rid of it, take the money, move on. He picked up his mug but didn't drink. But I couldn't do it. Stood here in this house looking at everything he'd built, and I just couldn't. So I stayed. Figured I'd give it a year, see if I could make it work. That was how long ago? 22 years. Elena raised her eyebrows. That's a long trial period. Turns out, I'm better at it than I thought I'd be. Or maybe I just needed something to prove I wasn't completely useless. He shrugged. Either way, it stuck. What about before? Before you came back here? College for 2 years, dropped out, worked construction in Dallas for a while. Met Sarah there. She was a teacher, 2nd grade. She had this way of making everything seem manageable, you know? Like nothing was too broken to fix. Elena heard the catch in his voice when he said Sarah's name. You really loved her. I did. Just not the way she deserved. Because of me. Caleb finally looked at her. No, not because of you, because I didn't know how to love someone completely. I thought I did, but... He stopped. When I saw you that first time, it wasn't like a switch flipped. It was more like I finally understood what people meant when they talked about that feeling. The one where you can't think straight, can't breathe right, where someone just gets under your skin and stays there. That sounds awful. It was. He almost smiled. Still is, most days. Elena wrapped her hands around her mug. Tell me something else. Something that has nothing to do with Sarah or me. Caleb thought for a moment. I'm afraid of heights. What? Heights. Can't stand them. Get me more than 10 feet off the ground, and I start sweating. Elena stared at him. You work with horses. You have a barn with a loft. I don't go in the loft. Ever? Not if I can help it. She found herself smiling despite everything. That's ridiculous. Tell me about it. My dad used to make fun of me for it. Said a rancher who's afraid of heights is like a fish afraid of water. How do you fix the roof? Very carefully, and I don't look down. Elena shook her head. Anything else? I can't sing at all. Tried once in church when I was a kid and the woman next to me asked if I was feeling all right. That bad? Worse. Elena laughed. Actually laughed. It surprised her. What else? Caleb settled back in his chair, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost relaxed. I read poetry, not just the stuff you like. Other things, too. Robert Frost, mostly. Langston Hughes. I've got a whole shelf of it in the study. I saw. I thought it was Sarah's. Some of it was. Most of it's mine. He paused. I'm not good at talking to people. Never have been. But poetry, it says the things I can't figure out how to say on my own. Like what? Like how lonely this place gets sometimes. How quiet it is out here. How you can go days without hearing another human voice and start forgetting what yours sounds like. Elena looked at him carefully. Is that why you wrote the letters? Because it was easier than talking? Partly, and partly because I needed to put it somewhere before it ate me alive. They sat in silence for a while. The coffee was getting cold, but neither of them moved to get more. My turn, Caleb said. Elena tensed slightly. For what? To ask you something. If you want. She considered this. Fair was fair. Okay. Why did you come here? I know you were desperate, but Carol probably gave you other options. Why me? Elena looked down at her hands. She didn't give me other options. She gave me one. Said there was a man outside the city who might help if I asked right. She didn't explain what that meant, just gave me your address. And you came anyway. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. Not when the alternative is freezing to death, you don't. Elena's voice came out harder than she meant. You don't know what it's like. To have nothing. To be so tired you can barely stand, but you can't stop moving, because if you do, you'll lose the last thing holding you together. You're right, Caleb said quietly. I don't know. Tell me. Elena stood up. Walked to the window. Outside, the sky was clear and cold, the kind of winter morning that looked beautiful but would kill you if you stayed out in it too long. I lost my job 18 months ago. Budget cuts. I had savings, but they didn't last as long as I thought they would. I applied everywhere: retail, food service, cleaning, anything. But I was overqualified for some things and underqualified for others. And nobody wanted to take a chance on someone who'd been out of work for more than a few months. She watched a bird land on the fence post outside, then take off again. I lost my apartment 6 months ago. Moved in with a friend for a while, but that fell apart. I stayed in my car for a bit, but it broke down and I couldn't afford to fix it. So I sold it. Used the money to stay in motels when I could, shelters when I couldn't. Elena. I'm not telling you this for pity, she cut him off. I'm telling you because you asked. Because you want to know why I knocked on your door. She turned to face him. I knocked because I was out of options. Because winter was coming and I knew I wouldn't make it through. Because some woman I barely knew told me you might help, and I was desperate enough to believe her. Caleb's face was carefully neutral, but his eyes were dark. What would you have done if I'd said no? I don't know. Probably ended up in a ditch somewhere. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Elena crossed her arms. You want honesty? There it is. I came here because I had nowhere else to go, not because I wanted to, not because I had some romantic notion about marrying a stranger, because I was broken and desperate and you were the only door left to knock on. Caleb stood up slowly. And now? What? Now, you're not desperate anymore. You've got a roof, food, warmth. You could leave if you wanted. Find something else. So why are you still here? Elena's throat tightened. I don't know. Yes, you do. I don't. I'm still trying to figure it out. Caleb took a step closer, not crowding her, just closing some of the distance. You stayed after you found the letters, after you knew what I'd done. You could have walked out right then, but you didn't. I was processing. You stayed after I told you I'd been watching you for 10 years, after I admitted I built this house for you, after all of it. I needed time to think. You're still here, Elena, still sitting across from me at breakfast, still asking me questions about myself, still trying to figure out what this is. His voice was low, steady. So I'm asking you again. Why? Elena felt something crack open in her chest. Because I'm tired of running. Because for the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. Because this house, as wrong as it is, feels more like home than anywhere I've been in a decade. She swallowed hard. And because part of me thinks maybe you're not as crazy as you seem. Caleb's expression softened just slightly. That's a low bar. It's the one I've got. He nodded, stepped back, gave her space again. I'm going to check the fence line. Should be back by lunch. Okay. He grabbed his coat and hat, paused at the door. Thank you. For what? For staying, even if you don't know why. He left before she could respond. Elena stood there for a long time, looking at the empty doorway, feeling like something had shifted between them. Something small, but significant. She was starting to see him. Not the man who'd watched her from a distance, but the person underneath. Flawed, lonely, trying his best to do right by her, even when he didn't know how. And maybe that was enough. For now. The days started to blur together after that, but in a good way. They fell into a rhythm that felt less like two strangers coexisting and more like two people learning how to be around each other. Caleb told her more stories. About growing up on the ranch, about his father, who'd been hard but fair, about the years he'd spent trying to be anyone other than who he was. He told her about the first time he'd delivered a calf by himself, how terrified he'd been that he'd mess it up. About the time he'd tried to train a horse that turned out to be mean as hell and nearly got himself trampled. About the winter he'd lost half the herd to a freak ice storm and had to rebuild from almost nothing. Elena listened, and slowly she started talking too. She told him about her mother, who died when Elena was 16. About the way she'd had to grow up fast after that, taking care of herself because her father had checked out emotionally and never really checked back in. About the jobs she'd loved and the ones she'd hated. About the friends she'd lost touch with over the years, the relationships that hadn't worked out. The dreams she'd let go of one by one. I wanted to be a teacher, she said one night over dinner. Elementary school. I loved kids. Loved the idea of being the person who made learning feel like magic instead of work. Why didn't you? Money. I couldn't afford the degree, and I couldn't afford to work for free during student teaching. So I got an office job instead. Paid the bills, kept me alive. She pushed food around her plate. But I hated it. Hated sitting in a cubicle all day, pretending to care about spreadsheets and quarterly reports. You could go back, Caleb said. Get the degree now. With what money? I've got money. Elena looked up sharply. No. I'm just saying, I'm not taking your money for school. We're not. She stopped. That's not what this is. What is this then? Elena set down her fork. I don't know yet, but it's not me using you to fund my dreams. What if I want to help? Then wait until I ask. Caleb nodded slowly. Fair enough. They dropped it. But Elena thought about it later, lying in bed. The fact that he'd offered, that he'd seen something she wanted and immediately thought about how to make it possible. It should have felt manipulative, like he was trying to buy her affection. But it didn't. It just felt like someone paying attention, like someone who cared. She didn't know what to do with that. Christmas came and went quietly. Elena hadn't expected Caleb to acknowledge it, but on Christmas morning there was a small package on the kitchen table with her name on it. Inside was a book, a first edition of Beloved, the pages crisp and perfect. Caleb, she said when he came in from feeding the animals, you can't, it's a gift. You're allowed to accept it. This must have cost a fortune. It cost what it cost. Do you like it? Elena ran her fingers over the cover. I love it. Then that's all that matters. She'd gotten him something too. A book of Robert Frost poems she'd found in a second-hand store in town when she'd gone to pick up groceries. It wasn't expensive, but she'd noticed he didn't have that particular collection. Caleb opened it carefully, read the inscription she'd written on the inside cover. For Caleb, who taught me that silence can be kind. Elena. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you. You're welcome. They spent the day together. No big production, no forced cheer. Just a quiet day in the house, reading by the fire, cooking together, existing in the same space without the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. It was the best Christmas Elena had had in years. January brought snow. Not much, but enough to blanket the ground and make everything look clean and new. Elena stood on the porch one morning, watching it fall, and felt something settle in her chest. She was happy. Not ecstatically, not desperately, just quietly, steadily happy. It terrified her. You okay? Caleb asked from the doorway. I don't know how to do this, Elena said without turning around. Do what? Be happy. Stay in one place. Trust that it's not going to fall apart. She watched a snowflake land on the railing and melt. Every time I get comfortable, something goes wrong. I'm waiting for that to happen here. Caleb came to stand beside her, not touching, just present. What if it doesn't? It always does. Not always. Sometimes things work out. Not for me. Maybe that's changing. Elena looked at him. You really believe that? I do. Why? Because you're here. Because you stayed. Because you're letting yourself be happy, even if it scares you. He met her eyes. That's not nothing, Elena. She wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways this could still go wrong, but she didn't. She just nodded and went back to watching the snow. Later that week, she found another letter. It was on the kitchen table, unsealed, her name written on the envelope in Caleb's careful handwriting. Her heart started pounding. She picked it up slowly, pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. Elena, I'm writing this because I'm still better on paper than I am out loud, and there are things I need to say. I know this hasn't been easy. I know I put you in an impossible position by keeping the truth from you at the start. I know the way I loved you before we met was wrong in all the ways that matter. But I want you to know that the way I'm loving you now is different. I'm not loving the idea of you anymore. I'm loving the person who burns toast and swears under her breath, who hums without realizing it when she's concentrating, who gets defensive when I offer help but accepts it anyway when she thinks I'm not looking. I'm loving the person who's scared and brave at the same time, who stayed even when every instinct probably told her to run. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if you'll ever really trust me. I don't know if I deserve for this to work. But I'm glad you knocked on my door. I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad I get to know you for real instead of from a distance. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that. Caleb Elena read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and set it on the counter. She found Caleb in the barn, working on the truck. He looked up when she came in, wiped his hands on a rag. I read your letter, she said. Okay? You didn't have to write it. I know. I wanted to. Elena took a breath. I'm not ready to say I love you back. I know. But I'm not running either. I know that too. And I think... She stopped, started again. I think I'm starting to see you. The real you. Not the one who watched me from a distance. The one who's here now, who's patient and kind and trying so hard not to screw this up. Caleb set down the rag. And I like him, the real you. I like him a lot. Something in Caleb's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but close. Yeah? Yeah. He took a step toward her, stopped. Can I... What? Can I hug you? Elena's breath caught. It was such a simple request, such a normal thing, but it felt monumental. She nodded. Caleb closed the distance between them and wrapped his arms around her carefully, like she might break. Elena let herself lean into him, let herself feel the solid warmth of another person. It had been so long since anyone had held her, since she'd let anyone close enough to try. She felt his heart beating steady against her cheek, felt his breath in her hair, felt safe in a way she hadn't in years. When they pulled apart, her eyes were wet. Sorry, she said, wiping at them. I don't know why. Don't apologize. I'm not usually... Elena. He tilted her chin up gently. It's okay. She nodded, stepped back. I need to... Take your time. She left the barn and went back to the house, sat on her bed with the letter in her hands and let herself cry. Not sad tears, not scared ones, just overwhelmed, grateful, terrified tears. Because she was starting to fall for him. The man who'd watched her from a distance, who'd built a house for her, who'd let her in and given her space and loved her in the most patient, impossible way. She was falling for him, and it scared her more than anything else ever had. Because if this fell apart, if this turned out to be another thing she couldn't keep, she didn't know if she'd survive it, but she also didn't know if she could walk away. So she stayed and hoped and let herself feel, even though it terrified her, even though it might break her. Because for the first time in a long time, she thought it might actually be worth the risk. February came in cold and mean, the kind of cold that got into your bones and stayed there, making everything harder than it needed to be. The pipes froze twice in 1 week, and Caleb spent hours under the house with a heat lamp and a string of curses that would have made his father proud. Elena helped where she could, passing him tools, holding the flashlight, making coffee that actually stayed hot. They worked together without talking much, a comfortable silence that had replaced the awkward tension of those first weeks. But something was shifting between them, and they both felt it. It started small, a hand on her shoulder as he passed her in the kitchen, her fingers brushing his when she handed him his coffee. The way he'd started sitting closer to her on the couch in the evenings, not touching but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Elena didn't pull away, and that scared her more than anything. One night, she couldn't sleep. She got up around 2 a.m, wrapped herself in the quilt from her bed, and went to sit by the fire. Caleb had banked it before bed, but there were still embers glowing. She was staring into them, lost in thought, when she heard footsteps behind her. You okay? Caleb's voice was rough with sleep. Elena didn't turn around. Couldn't sleep. Mind if I sit? It's your house. It's our house, he corrected gently. She looked at him then. He was in a t-shirt and sweatpants, hair sticking up on one side. He looked more human like this, less guarded. He sat in the armchair across from her, not saying anything, just being there. I'm falling for you, Elena said into the silence, and I don't know what to do about it. Caleb went very still. Okay? That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say? Elena pulled the quilt tighter around herself. I want you to tell me I'm not crazy. That this isn't just Stockholm syndrome or gratitude or whatever psychological thing happens when someone saves you and you mistake it for love. Is that what you think this is? I don't know. Maybe. How am I supposed to know the difference? Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Do you think about leaving? Sometimes. But you don't. No. Why not? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Because when I think about walking out that door and not coming back, something in me breaks. And I don't think that's gratitude. I think that's something else. What? I think it's caring. About you. About this. About us. She looked at him. And it terrifies me because I don't know if I can trust it. If I can trust you. If I can trust myself. Caleb stood up slowly, crossed to the couch, sat down next to her, close enough that their knees almost touched. You want to know what I think? He said. What? I think you're the bravest person I've ever met. You walked into a stranger's house with nothing but desperation and guts. You found out I'd been watching you for 10 years and you didn't run. You stayed, and you asked questions, and you gave me a chance I didn't deserve. He paused. And now you're sitting here telling me you're falling for me, even though every instinct you have is probably screaming at you to protect yourself. That's not Stockholm syndrome. That's courage. Elena's eyes burned. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. She laughed, but it came out shaky. You're not helping. I'm not trying to help. I'm trying to be honest. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. You want to know if what you're feeling is real? I can't answer that. Only you can. But I can tell you what I see. What do you see? I see someone who's been hurt and is still willing to try. Someone who's scared but showing up anyway. Someone who makes this house feel like an actual home instead of just a place I sleep. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I see someone I want to keep knowing, keep learning, keep loving, if she'll let me. Elena looked down at their joined hands. His were rough, calloused from years of work. Hers were smaller, scarred in their own ways. They fit together strangely well. I'm not good at this, she said quietly. At what? Trusting, letting people in. I've spent so long keeping everyone at arm's length that I don't remember how to do anything else. So we figure it out together. What if I can't? What if I'm too broken? Caleb's grip tightened slightly. Then we'll be broken together. I'm not exactly a prize here, Elena. I watched you from a distance for a decade. I built a house for someone I never spoke to. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking you to try. Elena felt something crack open in her chest. All the fear, all the resistance, all the walls she'd built to protect herself. They were still there, but they felt less solid now, less necessary. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. What if this doesn't work? Then we deal with it. But what if it does? Elena looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who'd been patient when he had no reason to be, who'd given her space when she needed it and stayed close when she didn't, who'd loved her in the most impossible way and was now trying to love her in the most human one. Okay, she said. Okay, what? Okay, I'll try. I'll try to trust this, to trust you, to trust myself. She squeezed his hand. But you have to promise me something. Anything. Don't hide from me. No more secrets. No more watching from a distance. If you're feeling something, tell me. If you're scared, tell me. If I'm doing something that bothers you, tell me. I can handle a lot of things, but I can't handle not knowing where I stand. I promise. I mean it, Caleb. I need honesty, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I know, and you'll have it. He paused. Can I ask the same from you? Elena nodded. Yeah, you can. They sat there for a while longer, hands linked, the fire burning down to nothing. When Elena finally felt herself getting tired, she stood up. I should go to bed. Caleb stood too. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then, very carefully, he leaned in and kissed her forehead. Good night, Elena. Good night. She went to her room and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart racing. That small kiss, that simple gesture, felt like more than any grand romantic moment ever could. Because it was real. It was them. It was a beginning. The next few weeks were different. Not dramatically, not in ways anyone watching from outside would notice. But between them, everything had shifted. They touched more. Nothing major, just small points of contact. His hand on her back as he moved past her in the kitchen, her fingers trailing across his shoulder when she brought him coffee. They sat closer on the couch, started reading together in the evenings, her with her book, him with his, their feet tangled up together on the ottoman. They talked more too, about everything and nothing, about the things that scared them, the things they wanted, the things they'd given up on, and the things they still hoped for. Elena told him about the year after her mother died, when she'd felt completely untethered from the world. About the teacher who'd noticed and pulled her aside, made her feel like someone still saw her. About how she'd wanted to be that person for someone else someday. Caleb told her about the months after Sarah's death, when he'd stopped leaving the house except to take care of the animals. About the day he'd forced himself to drive into town and had seen Elena at the coffee shop, and how that had been the first time he'd felt anything other than numb in 6 months. It wasn't healthy, he admitted, using you like that. Like you were some kind of lifeline I could hang on to without permission. But it kept you going. Yeah, it did. Then maybe it wasn't all bad. Caleb looked at her. You're being generous. I'm being realistic. You didn't hurt me. You didn't insert yourself into my life. You just existed near it. And yeah, it's weird. It's definitely weird. But you didn't do it maliciously. That doesn't make it right. No, Elena agreed. But it makes it human. And I can work with human. One afternoon in late February, Elena was in the kitchen making bread when Caleb came in from outside, stamping snow off his boots. We need to talk about something, he said. Elena's stomach dropped. Those words never meant anything good. Okay. The marriage, he said. It's still just on paper. I know. We should probably figure out what we want to do about that. Elena set down the dough she'd been kneading. What do you want to do about it? Caleb pulled out a chair and sat down. I want to make it real. Not the marriage, that's already real. But I want... He stopped, searching for words. I want you in my life for real, not because you needed a roof or because we signed some papers, because you choose to be here, because we're building something together. We are building something. I know, but I need to hear you say it. I need to know that's what you want too. Elena wiped her hands on a towel and sat across from him. What I want is to stop being scared all the time, to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop, to just be here with you and not constantly second-guessing whether I'm making a huge mistake. Are you? Making a mistake? I don't think so, but I'm not sure. And that terrifies me. Caleb reached across the table. She took his hand. I can't promise this will work, he said. I can't promise I won't screw it up somehow. But I can promise I'll try, every day, to be honest with you, to see you, to love you the way you deserve to be loved, not the way I've been doing it. How have you been doing it? From a distance. Even now, even with you here, part of me is still holding back, still afraid that if I get too close, you'll see something you don't like and leave. Elena's throat tightened. I'm afraid of the same thing. Then maybe we're both idiots. She laughed despite herself. Definitely. So what do we do about it? Elena thought for a moment. We jump, both of us. We stop holding back and we just see what happens. You ready for that? No, but I don't think I'll ever be ready, so I might as well do it scared. Caleb smiled. Actually smiled, full and genuine. Okay then. Okay. He stood up, pulled her to her feet, and kissed her. Really kissed her. Not just a forehead brush or a careful press of lips. It was messy and imperfect and exactly right. When they pulled apart, Elena was breathless. I'm still terrified, she said. Me too. Good. I'd be worried if you weren't. That night, Elena moved her things from the guest room to Caleb's room. Not because she had to, not because it was expected, but because she wanted to. Because sleeping alone in a room that had been prepared for her felt wrong now. Because she wanted to wake up next to him and see what that felt like. It felt good. Scary, but good. They lay in bed that first night, not touching, both of them too nervous to relax. This is weird, Elena said into the darkness. Yeah. Are we supposed to talk or just go to sleep or... I have no idea. Elena laughed. We're terrible at this. Give us time. We'll figure it out. She rolled onto her side to face him. He did the same. In the dim light from the window, she could just make out his features. Thank you, she said. For what? For being patient, for not pushing, for letting me come to this on my own terms. You don't have to thank me for basic decency. Yeah, I do, because it's not that basic. Not for everyone. Caleb reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I love you. I've loved you for 10 years, and I'm going to love you for the rest of my life. But I need you to know that even if you wake up tomorrow and realize this was a mistake, I'll still be grateful for the time you gave me, for the chance to know you for real. Elena's eyes burned. Don't say that. Don't give me an out before we've even really started. I'm not giving you an out. I'm giving you a choice. Always. That's the difference. She kissed him then, hard and desperate, trying to communicate everything she couldn't put into words. He kissed her back just as fiercely, and for a while they just existed in that space, learning each other, figuring out what worked and what didn't. When they finally pulled apart, Elena rested her forehead against his. I love you, she whispered. I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. And it scares me. But I'm saying it anyway. Caleb's arms tightened around her. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Caleb Holt. He kissed her again, slower this time, tender. And for the first time since she'd knocked on his door that bitter November morning, Elena felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. March brought warmer weather and the first signs of spring. The land started to green up, and Caleb had more work to do outside. Elena helped where she could, learning the rhythms of the ranch, figuring out where she fit into all of it. She started talking about going back to school. Not just thinking about it, but actually making plans. Caleb offered to pay, and this time she didn't say no, because it wasn't charity anymore. It wasn't him trying to buy her affection. It was a partner supporting a partner's dreams. They drove into the city one Saturday to meet with an admissions counselor. Elena was nervous, convinced they'd take one look at her transcripts and her work history and tell her it was too late. But they didn't. They told her about programs for adult learners, about financial aid, about flexible scheduling. By the time they left, Elena had a folder full of information and a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. You're really going to do this, Caleb said on the drive home. I think so. If you're sure, I'm sure. This is what you want. So we make it happen. Elena looked out the window at the flat Texas landscape rolling past. I never thought I'd get a second chance at this. Life's weird like that sometimes. Yeah. She reached over and took his hand. It really is. One evening in late March, Elena found one more letter. It was sitting on her pillow when she came in from the garden, sealed this time, her name written across the front. Her heart skipped. She picked it up carefully and opened it. Elena, this is the last letter I'll write to you like this. Not because I don't have things to say, but because I can say them to your face now. Because you're here. Because you stayed. I wanted to write this one to mark the end of something and the beginning of something else. For 10 years, I loved you from a distance. I watched you live your life and wished I could be part of it. I wrote letters I never sent and built a house for a person who didn't know I existed. And then you knocked on my door and everything changed. You've given me something I never thought I'd have. Not just your presence, but your trust. Your willingness to see past the weird, obsessive way this started and find something real underneath. I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful for it every single day. I'm grateful for the way you burn toast and don't apologize for it. For the way you argue with me about small things and big things and everything in between. For the way you've made this house feel like a home instead of just a building I live in. I'm grateful that you're here, that you chose to stay, that you're building a life with me instead of in spite of me. This is the last letter because I don't need to write them anymore. I can tell you these things. I can show you. I can be present in your life instead of observing it from the outside. But I wanted to write this one last time to say, I'm glad you knocked. I'm glad you stayed. I'm glad you took a chance on something that made no sense and turned it into something real. I love you. Not from a distance anymore, not in secret, just plain, simple, complicated, messy love. Thank you for giving me that chance. Caleb Elena read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Then she folded it carefully and went to find him. He was in the barn, same as that day months ago when she'd confronted him about the books. But this time when she walked in, he looked up and smiled. "You found it," he said. "I found it." "And?" Elena crossed to him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him. When she pulled back, she was still crying. "Thank you," she said, "for all of it, for watching even when you shouldn't have, for building this, for letting me in, for being patient, for loving me even when I didn't know how to love you back." Caleb's arms came around her waist. "You know how now." "I'm learning." "That's all we can do. Keep learning." She rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. Steady, reliable, real. "I'm glad I knocked too," she said quietly. "Yeah?" "Yeah." They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the quiet of the barn. Outside, spring was coming. The land was waking up. And inside, something else was waking up too. Something that had started wrong and impossible but had somehow, against all odds, become right. A year later, Elena graduated with her teaching certificate. Caleb was in the audience, front row, grinning like a fool. When she walked across the stage and accepted her diploma, he stood up and cheered, and she laughed so hard she almost tripped. She got a job at an elementary school 20 miles from the ranch. 3rd grade. Her mother would have been proud. Caleb still ranched, still kept the place running. But now Elena was part of it. She helped with the animals when she wasn't teaching, kept the books, made decisions with him instead of watching him make them alone. They fought sometimes. About money, about time, about stupid things that didn't matter, and important things that did. But they fought fair. They didn't hide. They didn't shut down. They worked through it. Because that's what you did when you loved someone. You stayed. You fought. You figured it out. They never had a real wedding. The courthouse ceremony was enough for them. But on their first anniversary, they had a party. Just a few people. Carol from the shelter, some ranching neighbors, Elena's new colleagues from school. Nothing fancy. Just food and music and people they cared about. Elena looked around at the house that night, at the life they'd built together, and felt something she'd never thought she'd feel again. Home. Real, solid, lasting home. Caleb found her on the porch later after everyone had left. He wrapped his arms around her from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. "Happy anniversary," he said. "Happy anniversary." "Any regrets?" Elena thought about it. About the fear, the doubt, the impossibility of how they'd started. About the letters and the watching and all the ways this should never have worked. "No," she said. "No regrets." Good. They stood there together, looking out at the land that had become theirs. Not just his. Theirs. And Elena realized something. Love didn't always make sense. It didn't always start right or follow the rules. Sometimes it was messy and weird and completely wrong on paper. But that didn't make it less real. Caleb had loved her from a distance for 10 years, had built a life around someone he'd never spoken to, had held on to hope that someday, somehow, she might walk through his door, and she had, desperate and broken and with nowhere else to go. But she'd stayed. She'd chosen to see past the impossibility and find the person underneath, the man who was flawed and lonely and trying his best. And together, they'd built something neither of them could have built alone. That was the thing about love, Elena thought. It wasn't about perfect timing or perfect circumstances. It wasn't about grand gestures or sweeping romance. It was about showing up, about choosing to stay when leaving would be easier, about being brave enough to try even when every instinct told you to protect yourself. It was about taking something broken and making it whole. "I love you," she said into the quiet. Caleb's arms tightened around her. "I love you too." And in that moment, with the stars bright overhead and the wind soft across the prairie, Elena finally understood what home really meant. It wasn't a place. It wasn't 4 walls and a roof. It was this. It was him. It was choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard. It was knocking on a door when you had nowhere else to go and finding something you didn't know you were looking for. It was love. Messy, imperfect, impossible love. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.